Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever felt a pang of loneliness and then found yourself feeling down about yourself, or maybe when you are feeling low, you start to feel more alone? Well, this new study dives deep into that very connection and how it plays out over years, not just days. Imagine tracking thousands of people for almost 20 years, asking them about how they feel about their social lives and how they feel about themselves. That is exactly what this massive study did. They looked at over 19,000 people in the Netherlands, collecting data every single year for 17 years. That's a lot of data and a lot of time to see how feelings change. The big question here is this: how does feeling lonely affect how we see ourselves, our self-esteem, and vice versa? Does being lonely make us feel less worthy? Or does feeling not good enough make us feel more alone? It is like a chicken and egg situation, right? And with so much data over such a long time, these researchers could really dig into the dynamics. Now, usually when scientists look at these kinds of questions over time, they might look at whether people who are generally lonelier are also generally have lower self-esteem. That's looking at differences between people. But this study wanted to see what happens within a person. Does a temporary dip in loneliness lead to a dip in self-esteem for that same person, even if they're usually not that lonely? Or does a temporary drop in self-esteem lead to more loneliness for them, even if they're usually pretty socially connected? This is key because how we change day to day or year to year might be different from how we compare to others overall. Another really cool thing about this research is how they thought about time. It is not like our feelings change instantly. To read the process, they use something called continuous time modeling. Think of it like this: instead of just taking snapshots at specific intervals, they built a model that assumes our feelings are changing continuously, like a flowing river, not just a series of still photos. This allows them to see when these effects between loneliness and self-esteem are strongest, when they peak, and when they start to fade. It's like watching a slow-motion replay to catch all the subtle movements. So, how did they do it? They used advanced statistical tools, specifically something called continuous time random intercept cross, lagged panel models. That's a mouthful, I know, but basically it is a super sophisticated way to look at long-term data. They separated out the stable, unchanging parts of a person's personality from the day to day or year to year changes in their feelings. This is crucial for understanding real change. They also looked at it over different time spans, from 1 year all the way up to 15 years, to see how the effects evolved. After all that complex analysis, what did they find? Let's look at the main results. The study confirmed that loneliness and self-esteem do have a reciprocal relationship, meaning they influence each other. This is shown in Table 1, where we see the scar effect and the vulnerability effect. The scar effect is when loneliness predicts lower self-esteem. Think of it like loneliness leaving a mark or a scar on how you feel about yourself. They found this was a significant connection. When people felt more lonely than usual, their self-esteem tended to go down later. Then there is the vulnerability effect, where lower self-esteem predicts more loneliness. When you don't feel great about yourself, you might withdraw or interpret social cues negatively, leading to more loneliness. This connection was also found to be significant. But here is a really key finding: the scar effect was stronger than the vulnerability effect. Being lonelier had a bigger impact on making someone feel worse about themselves than feeling bad about yourself had on making you more lonely. It suggests that loneliness is a particularly powerful force when it comes to our self-worth. And how long do these effects last? As Figure 2 shows, these effects didn't disappear immediately. They slowly built up, peaked at around 2 years, and then gradually faded, but they were still detectable even after many years. This means the impact of loneliness on self-esteem, and vice versa, isn't just fleeting. It can have lasting effects that unfold over a significant period. They also checked if this pattern held true for different types of loneliness, like social loneliness, feeling like you don't have enough friends, or group belonging, versus emotional loneliness, feeling like you lack close, intimate connections. And good news for the study's strength researchers found that the overall pattern remained pretty much the same for both types of loneliness. Loneliness in general tended to impact self-esteem more than the other way around, and it took a couple of years for these effects to reach their peak. This study also looked at factors that might change how strong these connections are. What if you have lots of friends or are in a long-term relationship? Do these things change how loneliness affects self-esteem? They found that women, compared to men, seem to have weaker scar and vulnerability effects. This could be because women's recovery from negative feelings might be slower, but perhaps they also rely on different or more diverse sources of social support that buffer the direct impact. When people felt more closely connected to others, meaning they saw themselves as more intertwined with others, they generally recovered faster from dips in loneliness or self-esteem. But interestingly, this closeness actually made the vulnerability effect, low self-esteem leading to loneliness, a bit stronger. It's like when you feel very connected, your self-esteem becomes an even more important signal for your social standing. They also looked at things like relationship status, living situation, and how often people socialize. People who were in romantic relationships, lived with a partner, or were more socially active generally recovered faster from fluctuations in their feelings. This makes sense, as having strong social ties can help buffer negative experiences. However, and this is important, the scar effect, where loneliness impacts self-esteem, seemed pretty much the same, no matter how many social connections people had. Regular social activity did help buffer the vulnerability effect, though meaning if you're generally socially active, having low self-esteem might be less likely to spiral into more loneliness. This study really highlights how important timing is. The fact that it takes around 2 years for the effects to peak, and that they can still be detected a decade later, is a big deal. It means these processes are slow-moving and can have long-term consequences. It also suggests that interventions might need time and consistent effort to be effective, not just quick fixes. Now, like any study, this one has its limits. While 17 years is a lot, looking at something happening every year doesn't give us the full picture of very short-term shifts, like how feeling lonely today might affect your self-esteem later tonight. So future research could combine long-term studies like this with short-term ones like daily diaries. Also, this study relied on people reporting their own feelings. That's great, but sometimes what we say we feel might be a little different from what's actually going on. Future studies could include reports from friends or family or even digital data to get a more rounded view. And finally, this study was in the Netherlands, while many psychological principles are universal. How we express and experience loneliness and self-esteem can vary across cultures. So more research in different parts of the world would be fantastic. So what's the big takeaway from all this fascinating research? Loneliness and self-esteem are definitely intertwined, and they influence each other over time. But the impact of loneliness on our self-esteem seems to be a bit stronger and more consistent than the other way around. These effects unfold gradually and can last for years, underscoring the importance of how we define ourselves and our connections. It really shows us that our social world and our inner world are not separate things, but a dynamic, interconnected system. From my perspective, this study is a huge step forward in understanding the complex dance between feeling connected and feeling good about ourselves. The continuous time modeling is a game changer for seeing how psychological processes unfold. It gives us a more realistic picture of how our feelings interact and evolve over the long haul. The finding that loneliness is a more potent driver of negative self-evaluation is particularly impactful. It suggests that addressing loneliness directly might be a key strategy for boosting self-esteem, and that perhaps we need to be more vigilant about the long-term impacts of social isolation. The idea that these effects build up over years is a powerful reminder that chronic loneliness isn't just a temporary mood, but something that can fundamentally shape how we see ourselves, and that the effects of not feeling good about ourselves can take a long time to manifest as social difficulties. The moderators also add really important context. It suggests that while the impact of loneliness on self-esteem is robust, the pathway from low self-esteem to loneliness can be influenced by our social circumstances. This hints that interventions might need to be tailored, considering both the individual's self-perception and their social environment. Imagine what we can do with this knowledge for individuals. It highlights the importance of nurturing social connections, not just for immediate happiness, but for long-term self-worth for therapists and counselors. It provides a clearer roadmap of how loneliness can impact clients and suggests that interventions might need to focus on both social reconnection and self-compassion, with an understanding that change takes time. For public health initiatives, it underscores the serious long-term consequences of loneliness and the need for societal approaches to foster connection. Moving forward, I'd love to see more research that combines these long-term yearly studies with very short-term daily measurements to truly capture the immediate ripple effect. And exploring these dynamics across different cultures will be crucial for understanding the universal and culturally specific aspects of these connections. That's it for this episode of RUBIN'S Mind Lab. What surprised you most about this research? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found this breakdown helpful, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe for more insights into the human mind and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next adventure into science. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.